Is okay, people coming. Let's get started. Recording is on. Good. Yep. Okay. Hello, welcome everyone to our webinar Beyond the Breach, Ransomware Resiliency and Recover Tales. I'm thrilled to have you all join us for this critical discussion on data security and ransomware protection. Today, we are diving deep into real-life ransomware disasters and recovery stories that have reshaped how business approach data security. We will explore the consequence of inadequate backup solutions and showcase proactive measures, data leakage stories, and solutions. I'm really excited to introduce our special guest today. First, we have Frank Rushicha, CEO and co-founder of Brewing Security. With over 20 years in cybersecurity, Frank actually brings invaluable experience from investigating over 500 security incidents. His background, including leadership roles at IBM, Turf Highland, and a global breach investigation firm. Frank's pragmatic approach to security, risk assessment, and compliance will provide crucial insights for our discussion today. Also joining Frank is our old friend Ryan, the Vice President of Sales at Catalogic Software. Ryan brings a wealth of experience in understanding and addressing a wide range of customer data protection challenges. I believe you all know that. So to begin with our discussion today, I'd like to turn to Frank. Hey, Frank, it's your first time to join our webinar series, right? So could you please help us introduce yourself briefly and kick off our topics with some a real world case? I believe people come here to hear the real stories.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dan, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation. I'm excited to discuss some of the examples, some of the cases with Ryan. And you know, we hear a lot about data protection, data security, and data backups, especially as ransomware and some of the more data-centric threats have emerged over the last 5 to 10 years. But maybe before we dive into some of those examples, Ryan, I was going to ask you if you could maybe just set the stage with what does this concept of 3-2-1 mean? What is it really for clients? Why is it important? We hear it a lot, and we always hear it as sort of the de facto go-to method or standard to use.
Sure, yeah, definitely, Frank. I mean, you know, the data protection strategy 3-2-1 means that you should at least maintain 3 copies of your data on 2 different sets of medias and 1 copy at least offsite. You know, they've even taken a step further where there's a 3-2-1-1-0. So the extra 1 is 1 copy offline and 0 for verified backups without any errors, right? And I think just like you had mentioned, over the past couple of years, you've seen ransomware become a huge threat, right? And I think back in the day, people were worried about, man, if my hardware fails or if somebody deletes something, let me go ahead and try to get this stuff back, right, from tape and whatnot. Nowadays, right, you got to be worried about ransomware attacks. And I think one of the biggest things with ransomware attacks too is they're aiming for your backups. So you need to actually have these multiple copies in this type of strategy, like at least a minimum of 3-2-1. And even then, in some cases, I would say that it's hard for some businesses to meet those requirements just because not everything is free, right? There's always some business impact that may cause it to say, hey, we can only do X, Y, Z, right? So I hope that kind of sets the stage, right, as well for what we're going to talk about next.
Yeah, it does, and it's really helpful. Ryan, one thing I always hear from clients is, you know, we have backups, we test them, we're in great shape, we have the backups, but where they miss, I think where a lot of sort of the thought and planning stops is, what's the recovery point that you can actually recover, right? What's the recovery point objective, the RPO? What is the recovery time objective? How long does it take me to bring the business back, or at least the critical systems back? And some of those things and sort of make a lot more sense once you incorporate them into your strategy, as opposed to just, yeah, I have my backups, I have my 3, 2, 1. I've done the 3 and I have the 1 and I feel very confident that I could recover from it. I know there was one thing that we wanted to talk about, and that is sort of the overall challenges in the context of cybersecurity and how data plays such a critical role in businesses and being or not being protected. So to get one thing out of the way, data is the de facto most critical asset for most organizations, right? We know that, whether it's financial data, whether it's IP, whether it's some critical transaction data, it is the most critical asset an organization has. Protecting that data, however, isn't just about keeping it available, so to speak, right? It isn't just about having a safe copy of it somewhere in a safe and being able to recover from it. There are really 3 dimensions to protecting data. It's the availability, of course, right? It's where we see the most incidents, whether it's ransomware where the data is encrypted, whether it's just the infrastructure that becomes unavailable that supports the transactions. It's essentially making the business inoperable for a certain period of time. The availability becomes a huge factor. The second, of course, is confidentiality, right? This is where data is actually being taken and somehow exposed. Sensitive data is exfiltrated or stolen or taken or moved and ultimately exposed either on a dark web or some public sources to either embarrass or to essentially extort some sort of a ransom from the client. And the third dimension I know we'll talk about as well is of course integrity, right? And integrity of data, or maintaining integrity of data, is incredibly critical for businesses, especially those that operate in a world where they depend on that data telling them how the business operates or business should work, or what the transaction should be, or which system should open or close, and so forth. And so that data integrity is incredibly important, and one that's I think more so at risk than it has been in the past. So in the context of the solutions, Ryan, that you described, I think those are some of the biggest problems that we see from a security standpoint.
Yeah, and to touch base on one thing you said as well, like RTO and RPO being very, very important. It brings back to one of our customers as well, and that customer obviously wants to do the 3-2-1 backup rule, and his organization didn't have those funds or didn't want to invest those funds to give him those different types of capabilities. Like for our solution, listen, we have the ability to back up to disk, to tape, to cloud. We can replicate. We even have recovery features and functions to instantly spin up VMs at a DR site. Like in this customer's case, he said, listen, I'm using storage snapshots that I can go ahead and recover from, which is actually a great instant. Except when the infiltrator had got into their system, went ahead and logged into their storage and deleted all of their storage snapshots, right? And they were using our solution, but it was only to tape. Now, fortunately, at least for tape, it's an offline copy, right? So they're able to certainly recover from tape. But I'll tell you that process of going ahead and recovering from that was also difficult, because they typically have not done these sort of DR tests before, right? They were anticipating, hey, listen, if I actually get hit with something, I'm going to go and recover from my snapshots or my replica snapshots. In their case, the snapshots were deleted, same on the replica, and then all of the VMs were effectively encrypted as well, right? And I think that's why it's important to kind of have all of these different strategies in place, these different types of copies, and also being able to have a solution that can go ahead and help you validate the integrity of that data to recover it instantaneously, right? And maybe test it every quarter and so forth, right? So I just wanted to touch base on that. And I guess my question for you too is from your experience from a security standpoint, are there unexpected challenges businesses face that data protection solution could solve?
Yeah, I mean, the sort of the unexpected is always the things you don't plan for, right? And it's the Steve, the old saying is the sure way to fail is to fail to plan. And so when you have things like disaster recovery plans or availability plans or incident response plans, you at least forecast the challenges that you're going to encounter. You can exercise those. You can uncover the things that perhaps are still exposed and solve those. But sort of the unexpected usually comes in a form of just how long things take to bring back even after you have your data. One example I was going to share is I believe this was a healthcare organization that had a fairly robust sort of regional operation, number of locations, number of employees. And as a result of a ransomware event, they essentially went down as a business, right? So they had their entire environment encrypted. Of course, the ransomware was deployed as a result of phishing attack, a successful phishing attack, which spread the malware across the enterprise. As a result, the infrastructure was inoperable, and so on one hand, the business spent a tremendous amount of effort to ensure that their backups were valid and they could recover from them. Like you said, Ryan, earlier, is ensuring that the integrity of the backups was there. But then the rest of the infrastructure to rebuild the Active Directories and the servers and the workstations and the right loads and the right images and sort of just that sort of core infrastructure underneath took somewhere around, I think, 6 to 8 weeks to bring back up. And that's sort of the invisible sort of elephant in the room. When you talk about backup strategy, you have a fantastic data set, you have a fantastic strategy for RP or RTO, but you lose sight of the foundational infrastructure that needs to be in place to ultimately be recovering on. But I think that's just one example, sort of that availability dimension of data protection where it can really be challenged.
No, definitely. I've seen this before as well. And sorry, I was cutting you off. Go ahead.
No, and I was just going to ask if there's a difference between, we talk about physical infrastructure a lot, right? And of course, a number of organizations, small, medium, large, have made the leap and moved to cloud environments, various cloud providers, but also deploying sort of hybrid infrastructures in the meantime with virtual servers and virtual infrastructures, right? And that's one thing that we have seen over the years is as more and more companies, organizations adopt virtual environments, it gives you more flexibility in how you recover. It gives you more flexibility in how you protect. I was wondering if you could just touch on that as sort of difference between physical and virtual backup strategies and environments.
Sure. No, yeah, definitely. Like in physical environments, we have a great solution. Like you can, back in the day, everything was physical servers, let's just say, and there's still some subsets of physical servers today, right? And if there's a real disaster, we have something called bare metal recovery. You effectively put in an image and it could just restore the operating system area. So you don't have to rebuild from scratch. So that's great. You just have to wait for the data transfer time to push that data over to that physical system. From a virtual standpoint, it's interesting now, especially you talk about flexibility, because you could now, with our backups that are going, let's just say we have this virtual appliance, it could be a physical appliance called vStore. All this data is stored as snapshots, right? And all of these VMs are effectively backed up, their native format, VMDKs. We can go ahead, instantly spin up these VMs. But what's even more interesting is like, okay, yes, maybe this environment is compromised. This network is you don't know what's going on in this network. With this whole capability, this orchestration capability we have, we can spin up a subset of VMs to say, hey, instead of going onto this VLAN, reconfigure to go onto this VLAN, right? Re-IP, et cetera, right? And do all of these things to at least help alleviate some of that load, that manual intervention that you may have had to done in a disaster where if it was a physical system, let's say you rebuild the operating system, you have to rebuild the operating system, you're restoring from tape or just restoring the files, then you have to rebuild Active Directory, et cetera, right? In the case of VMs, I think it definitely helps expedite things and gives you a little bit more, I shouldn't say a little bit, a lot more flexibility. And even in the sense of disaster recovery as well, to do some sort of automation and testing.
Yeah, and it makes things so much easier, right? And you have so much more control over the sort of the infrastructure aspects of the device. when you're dealing with virtual environments. So we talked about confidentiality, right? We talked about availability and integrity. There are a lot of cases that people usually talk about when it comes to data leakage, right? And I know you guys have a lot of experience with that. I was going to just share a couple examples first, and maybe get your take also, Ryan. We forget that data leakage can be not only unintentional but also intentional, right? And where most plans fail is where they don't take into account the intentional data leakage that perhaps employees, insiders, contractors, etc. Can especially apply on an organization. We sort of deal with the unintentional, right? Someone breaks in and steals your data, or you lose your laptop, or you forget it at a Starbucks, or someone looks over your shoulder. All those unintentional scenarios are well understood. It's the intentional data leakage that's difficult, right? It's the disgruntled employees that leave and take data with them, right? Take customer data with them. They do a download of sensitive data before they leave the employer. It's those scenarios that are difficult to model use cases for and find the right solutions, especially in the data protection realm. Are there things, Ryan, that you guys come across that help bridge the data protection of sort of the backup physical and virtual to almost that DLP world where you are protecting the data from escaping the organization, either intentionally or unintentionally?
Yes. Well, so clarify a couple of things, right? So if, let's just say, ransomware attack hits somebody and they encrypt a bunch of data, right? And you need to get access to it. Obviously, that's where we come really in handy, in the sense of you don't have to pay the ransomware, etc. We can recover that data. Now, if they choose to leak that out, regardless of the fact, I don't think there's anything we can do there, right? But I think from being proactive as well, we have something in our product. It's called GuardMode. Okay, you can think of it as pre-backup, post-backup in a sense. So we originally released it for pre-backups in a sense. So it's agents that are deployed on VMs or physical systems, Windows, Linux. What it's doing is monitoring the IO, right, and trying to identify specific patterns. There's certain extensions that it's aware of, like ransomware extensions. You can create honeypots, etc. as well. And effectively, if there's something strange going on in that system, you can get alerted, right, in the sense, and say, hey, there might be something strange going on there, right? And we're doing some sort of entropy checking as well on those files that are being modified, etc. So you can at least try to limit the amount of leakage as well. And also taking that guard mode that we've deployed from a pre-backup perspective and then post is the ability to go ahead and scan your backup sets, right? Whether you have physical systems or virtual systems, whatever it is. Actually, when we back it up to this virtual appliance I mentioned before called the vStore, it's going ahead and scanning through these snapshots and actually opening up the file system and doing entropy checking on that as well, and giving you alerts, right, to say, hey, we got something here. Let's go take a look at it. Let's try to stop that leakage as best as possible. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And I know we have sort of limited time today, but I wanted to see if we could cover also sort of the third dimension of sort of data protection, the integrity of data, right? And you mentioned at the very beginning, Ryan, a very important sort of game-changing technology. We kind of take it for granted now, of course, all of us in the technology world, immutable backups, right? Can you maybe just define what that is, and then maybe I'll play with an example or two based on your definition.
Sure. Immutable backups is your backups that effectively can't be deleted and destroyed, right? If you think about it, and I keep saying like back in the day, right, versus now, but still people use some of this technology today, where they could be taking your backups and just backing up to a regular file system, into a folder share, let's just say, and here are all your backups in a folder share. But if an intruder gets into your system and they have access to that folder, delete, right, or encrypt, then all of that is gone, right? So there's different types of technologies out there. Like, for example, I see a lot of things like immutable storage. So you can buy this purpose-built appliance. Object storage has this immutability. You send it to the cloud and they have these immutable backups, right? For us, in our case, in that vStore, it actually has, our vStore is software defined, so you can deploy on any hardware or virtual appliance, and it actually has this built-in immutability. But it is very, very important, because if an intruder gets in, you don't want them to just delete all of your backups, right? You have this ability to say, here's the integrity of this. You know, it hasn't been modified. It hasn't been changed. It has a set retention. That's the retention period in which it can go ahead and remove this specific copy. Nobody else can effectively remove it. So I kind of hope that sets the stage for you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a game changer. I mean, and it's funny, I use the same exact terminology sort of back in the day. I mean, we've sort of become used to some of this technology being every day, but there are still a lot of companies, a lot of organizations that don't use it, or they don't take full advantage of it. Where we started to see sort of the problem side of the immutable backups before they really became pervasive was with poisoning of the backup files, right? The threat actors would use the backup, and if they had sort of non-segregated access to it, they'd use that pathway to poison the backup with malware, poison it with some of the ransom encryption techniques and so forth, and you would sort of have to reverse engineer the backup because you didn't have that immutability, right? You didn't have that true write once capability. You just have to find your way through the history to something that still had high integrity, and then you would lose a huge amount of recovery point, back to the recovery point objective, because of that poisoning. So I think it was a game changer, and of course now we take it for granted. There's also sort of the scenario of data integrity being challenged over time without really a demand or any sort of ransom until after it already has been poisoned enough to where the backups have gone past the recovery points, they have gone to past the histories and so forth, where I think we see emerging threats, emerging sort of risks around data sets being altered. For example, in healthcare, if we take healthcare as an example, say patient records are altered with the dosages or the amount of medicine or the type of diagnosis or the type of blood types, and they're simply altered. They're not encrypted. They're altered, obviously for nefarious reasons over time, and as a result, the integrity of data is so dramatically altered, say over 6, 9, 12-month period, that the only way to recover from that is from having those true immutable backups in place and being able to piece the data together and resolve those integrity issues. Because otherwise, it's an absolute disaster, right? And that's what some of the threat actors are preying on is, if I'll start modifying your data, and 6 months later I come back and say, hey, I've made a bunch of changes. I'm not going to tell you what they are. Good luck. And by the way, if you pay me, this huge amount of money, then I'll find a path to piece it back together for you. That's a significant risk, right? And there are some industries that are really concerned about that, and for the right reasons. And I think true sort of immutability or immutable data backups and the technology that's there, and the ability to connect those good backups and build the path to recovery is incredibly important. And I think that's what you guys and the rest of the sort of the storage and backup industry is doing to prevent threats like that, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, just seeing requests here and day in, day out of ensuring that you have immutable backups. I mean, even some of the requirements nowadays, right? As we're coming to new prospects, the first question I get asked is, does your solution come with immutable backups, right? And obviously, on top of everybody's mind, I'm sure you're seeing it also from the security standpoint, or even from an insurance standpoint. Probably, if you want to get insured, do you have X, Y, Z, right? One of them probably is being immutable backups. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly. It's an interesting angle, right? Because everyone's looking after mitigating that risk, right? Whether it's the clients themselves, whether it's their executive, whether it's their investors, right? We see a lot of sort of private equity firms that evaluate investments or make investments in companies that then want to ensure that those backups are there, and there's a path to recovery in case there is any sort of disaster, not just a security disaster, but any sort of infrastructure availability disaster, which is also the reality. And then, of course, insurance companies, cyber insurance companies, and other sort of liability insurance that wants to see those requirements in place. So, no, I think this really covers a plethora of sort of topics around data protection, data recovery. I'm wondering, Ryan, if there is any sort of client example that is most memorable for you in terms of either helping or resolving a major issue, and then maybe I'll close with an example from our side as well, Dal, and we can open up for questions if that's okay.
Yeah, please let me just cut a little bit as we have like 5 or 4 minutes left, and I just ask all the attendees if you have any questions, you can type your question in the Q&A module, and we will answer that. So far, I see just one, so you can ask for free. All right. Right.
Is there? I don't see the. Did you want me to answer the question, Dal, or I was going to continue on with?
No, I will read that. Yeah. Don't worry.
Okay. Frank, I mean, from our perspective, right? I think, and just thinking about our clients in general, right? About this whole ransomware and what does our solution provide and offer? I think flexibility is certainly one thing. Okay, in the sense that our license is a simple license that gives you all of these capabilities. It's all built in, right? I mean, you don't have, if you wanted immutability as an example, you don't have to go out and buy a specific hardware appliance in order to get immutability, right? It's software defined, it's in there. If you wanted to do this disaster recovery orchestration and spin up a bunch of VMs for DR testing or even for validating the integrity of the data, it's all in that single license, because I know there's different solutions out there that are going to kind of twist your arm and say, hey, if you want these special features or functions, even the same thing for immutability as well, you have to be on a different tier, right? And I think that's some of the things that our clients appreciate at a in a generalized level. And then thinking back to some of these ransomware incidents where it has become really, really bad, I would say the other big sticking point is our support team. We've been on the phone with some customers for 12 to 24 hours at certain points in time, rebuilding some of the things that you had just mentioned previously before. And even if it's some of the things that aren't necessarily like, as a backup vendor, for example, it's like our expectation is that your tape library should be all set up and ready and configured if we're going to restore it from tape, right? We have people on our team who have extensive background. Everybody in support is actually like level 2, level 3 engineers who have the experience to say, hey, I can help you set up that tape hardware. I know this is a terrible situation for you, right? So those are kind of the things that I can think of off the top of my head that customers appreciate about our solution and what we can offer in the discussion of ransomware.
Yeah, and it's rewarding, right? It's so rewarding to be able to help a client, especially in a difficult situation, right? These are, sometimes existential problems, right? Clients are down, they're unable to service their customers, they're unable to operate, they're unable to do payroll, things like that. I know you had questions, Dai. I was just going to point out one thing as maybe just in sort of closing my soapbox here is, you deal with a lot of examples of disasters, right? And that's sort of the sad part of this is we get to all these solutions from a position of something bad had happened. There's nothing more rewarding to see than clients who take a proactive approach and say, I understand the risks, I understand what may happen. It hasn't happened to us yet. We know we need to do certain things. And they sort of top down create a culture of awareness and understanding and appreciation for both the technology risk, but also the security risks, and then empower the organization to make the decisions to protect and prevent those things from happening. There's nothing more sort of exciting to see. And we see that from time to time, right? We come across clients who are just so aware and so understanding and appreciative of what these risks are. And they start to put the solutions in place so they don't have to experience one of those difficult events or incidents in the future. And that's probably the most rewarding part of the work that we do.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Perfect.
Todd, did you
Okay,
have
it's
that
about
question?
time, and we have a question. I think this is probably for you two, both of you, because it's the friend said, I'm supporting a small business and no backups now are being performed at this time. What would be a proactive approach to help this customer? Their desktop is MS-DOS and the owner's laptop is Apple with thousands of files. So which all stored on the Apple laptop. So I believe it's for both of you. I guess this friend came for this data assessment guy, right, Frank?
Well, I mean, it's if your client is appreciative of the problem, right? That's a huge win already, right? If you don't have to convince someone that this is important, then it's a huge win already. If you do, however, then I would use both the technology risk and the security risk as the business drivers, and just be very candid about what could happen if we lose this data. Would that put our business at risk for a month, for a week, for a couple of days? How long would it take us to recover? Just have that honest conversation. And I think that will then drive well, this makes sense to invest in, and this is what the investment is appropriate for a problem of this magnitude. And then maybe reach out to guys like Ryan to say, now, what is the right solution, right? What is the right technology that we need to implement to avoid these risks from happening?
Yeah, and I mean, some other things to think of. You don't have a backup solution today, right? And maybe for budgeting reasons, you can't afford a backup solution. Okay, are you, like, for example, are you guys using Office 365 and SharePoint as an example? Okay, then you guys start thinking about, okay, well, instead of everybody saving data onto their laptop directly, maybe we should be having a policy in place to store it in SharePoint or something. So in the event that if a system, whole PC gets corrupted, right, or infected by ransomware, they can't access it, but at least you have your files effectively stored. Now, hopefully they don't have access to that SharePoint location, right, and so forth. But these are other things that you can also think about as other types of strategies. You don't have a backup solution for your laptops. Let's just say you can't afford it. Then let's just figure out, okay, in this specific scenario, maybe I can store it somewhere else, right? And then Microsoft has some, I don't remember off the top of my head, but some capabilities of storing data for X period of time and so forth as well too.
Yeah, good. Yeah, also I think from my personal experience, we can put the files into some NAS, and we are very good at NAS backup. So it's a very typical like SMB solution, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, contact us. We'll tell you, right? If we can do something, we can, and then we'll walk you through any type of scenario. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, let me just left a email here, and if you have any question, you can contact our email, and we will reply you immediately. Okay. So as we come to the end of this webinar, I know a lot of people want to ask questions, and you can left a message to us. So thank you all for joining us today for the webinar, and very special thanks to our panelists, Frank and Ryan, for their invaluable insights. And also, don't forget to check your email for the exclusive data assessment guide, self-assessment guide. So remember, proactive protection is always the key to fight against the ransomware. All right, stay secure, and we will see you next time. Bye, guys.
Cool. Thanks, Da. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
your time, Frank. It was good
See you
chatting
guys.
with you. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.